That one, head tech teacher.
I saw one.
Thanks.
That one's
I like this. In the way they did it, I got the sense that he was
What's the matter? Did we do something wrong?
No, you can join the cool kids, or you can sit there.
You know what? This is the cool stuff.
No.
variety started slice of life. You weren't there.
I've been here for like an hour waiting for my friends to join me.
Yeah, I walked in with you.
Yeah, it's true, because I was trying to get here fast and it's a slow car.
Oh,
Couldn't get to speed up.
This was in the springtime, summer. Yeah.
No, you didn't. One's me.
This meeting is called to order at 7:04. Please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first order of business is to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Okay. The motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Agenda is approved unanimously. Next order of business is to approve the open session minutes of February 11, 2019.
Motion to approve the open meeting minutes of February 11th, 2019.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved unanimously. Next order of business is superintendent's comments.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Just very, very briefly, but something that we're super, super proud of and super delighted this evening to welcome both Lisa Young and Caitlin Comer from Boston Scientific, who are here this evening to present our district, and specifically Misco Hill Middle School, with a grant award of $1,500 for the Misco Hill Clean Energy Garden and Compost Program. The grant was one of only, I believe, 10 that were awarded for this most current cycle. And I think it really speaks to the terrific work that's being done throughout the district, and specifically at Misco with regard to STEM and creating more hands-on opportunities, hands-on learning opportunities for our students. So if Lisa and Caitlin could come forward for a presentation of the check, maybe. And I really would be remiss if I didn't recognize Dave Quinn, our Director of Technology Integration, who really was the heart and soul, along with Lisa, a proud Misco mom, in putting all of this together.
Excellent. So thank you, Joe. So just to talk a little bit about the grant, we're excited because at Boston Scientific, we often are able to give grants to underserved or underprivileged groups. And Caitlin was actually the brainchild behind this idea that to allow employees to submit grants that they're passionate about. And as Joe mentioned, there were about 50 submissions and only 10 got chosen and only 5 in Massachusetts. So we were really pleased to see that Misco Hill was chosen, and thanks to Dave and to Joe, really helped to move this along for sure and helped make a compelling argument for this grant. That's going to help us create a weather station so we can have a more sustained garden green energy, and it'll take into account the atmospheric pressure as well as precipitation and ensure that we're having a sustaining garden. And then to build it into the curriculum is really cool too, which I'm excited about. So it lets children have the opportunity to build the weather station so they get some electronics experience, and then they get some computing, some programming, and then they get to see those results come to fruition where they'll see sustainable garden and vegetables and potentially sharing that with the community. So overall, really an exciting project, and I'm glad we're able to help supplement that from Boston Scientific. And a big thanks to the support that we got here to help drive this great initiative. So excited to present this to you all.
Sure, why not?
I know. And I invited some children along from Boston Scientific parents, and of course my own, to come up. I know we have Lilia and Caroline Young and Maddie to come on up. They will hopefully reap the benefits of this in 8th grade, right, in science and technology. Get everybody. You should get it.
Grab the picture.
Yes, sir. And Caitlin, I'd love to get a picture of you in here too.
Okay, well, someone take this camera?
Yeah, Jeff will help. My husband's great. Here you go.
Let's jump in the back. It's shifted, so.
Yeah, come on in.
Photoshop.
Let's get you in here. Excellent.
All right.
Taking this out of it.
It might be a little awkward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dave, don't be taking that home.
Check it. Forward to concept only.
All right, next item on the agenda is teacher comments. So I'd like to invite Doug Johnson to come up and discuss the Fund Our Future.
Thank you. And thanks, Joe, for talking about stuff and stuff. Just having trouble with it. So, Fund Our Future is a campaign that's been put forth by the MTA. So let me tell you a little bit about it. First of all, my name is Doug Johnson, a special ed teacher at MISCO. I'm also on the board of directors for the Massachusetts Teachers Association for this region. And we voted as a board of directors for the MTA to put this initiative forward with a coalition of other people, other groups as well, other labor unions and human rights unions as well. So I know that I'm not going to do it justice as well as Joe could do it if he was presenting much better at this than I am, but I will try my best. So it's called Fund Our Future. I'm going to try and move through these slides, some of these slides fairly quickly, because this presentation was designed by the Vice President of the MTA, and actually I probably should have presented it a while ago, but so some of the slides I'll go through quickly, and some of them I'll stop and talk about because it relates more to Mendon-Upton Regional School District and school districts around the Commonwealth as well. So that's a copy of the Constitution for the state of Massachusetts, and in that Constitution, this is actually Chapter 5, Section 3. I'm just going to point you guys to the red highlighted area where it says that we will cherish the interests of literature, the sciences, and all seminaries, especially University of Cambridge, which I think became Harvard actually. And then public schools, grammar schools as well throughout the Commonwealth. And honestly, I think that probably back then that they tried their best, and I think that the Commonwealth over a period of time has sort of fallen short in funding our public schools. And there's going to be some examples of it. I'll go through it quickly. This is Chapter 78. Joe could speak to it, Dr. Mushek could speak to it much better than I could, but Chapter 78 is a state-funded formula that funds public schools in the Commonwealth. You can see that under Mitt Romney, who was the governor a while ago, the state aid has fallen dramatically. It took a big hit during the recession, as you can see. It has recovered since then, but it's still fallen short since that time period. So the funding formula, I don't think has been changed in quite a while, which is why it's fallen so short in terms of funding our public schools, the state funding our public schools. This is some litigation that was taken up against our state. I'd be happy, by the way, I can share this with the school committee as well if you want to see it later. I know I'm going pretty quickly, but as you can see, there's some stuff going on. It's where Chapter 70 comes in. Back in 1978, it was litigation. Chapter 70 came around, and then recently in 1993 was the Education Reform Act. And when that came about was when the foundation budget was established. I was talking to Dr. Mushek earlier. The foundation budget is exactly that. It's a foundation. So Mendon-Upton has a foundation that the state determines is the foundation that it needs to fund education. Just the foundation. So think of it building a house, right? We're building a house, the state says you just need this foundation, these walls, that's it. No, nothing extra, that's what you need. So the foundation budget is different for each region, each town, each public school. So Mendon-Upton has its own foundation, Springfield has its own foundation. So it's a weighted formula that the state is going to distribute the money to the towns around the Commonwealth. This is just continuing the timeline. The only thing I would point out here is that there was a foundation budget review committee in 2015, which is where these numbers came from. $185,000 richer, which is a pretty good substantial amount of money. But what happens here in 2016 is the Fair Share Amendment that did not get even taken to the ballot. There was a few different things on it. There was minimum wage, raising it to $15 an hour. Governor Baker did it anyways, just did it, which is good. That's great. There was also family medical leave that he changed as well. One of the big things on it, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, which is called the millionaire's tax. So the millionaire's tax was to basically give a 4% tax to millionaires in the state of Massachusetts. And the Supreme Court deemed that was unconstitutional, and so the amendment, it was never voted on by basically the voters in Massachusetts. It never made it to the ballot. Had it made it to the ballot, it would have changed the Constitution, which means that there would have been $1 billion every year for transportation education in the state from that tax alone. So just from that tax, every year there would have been that increase. Now, it would have been distributed amongst all the towns, I understand that, but I do know that transportation, so they don't need it, and would have given more to education, so. So these are the two pieces of legislation that's going through Congress in the State House right now. So there's actually three. I'm not going to speak to the third one. The third one is called the Tucker Act, and there's absolutely no information on how the money would be distributed. But the two acts up there are, one is called the Cherish Act, which is also the Promise Act. Cherish Act refers to higher education. The Promise Act refers to K through 12. You can see that Baker's plan is about, I don't know, what is that? A lot less. Let me see if the next slide has it. I might not. But the Baker's plan is about half of what the Promise Act is. So Promise Act was created by Sonia Chen-Diaz. She was going to put it forth last year. Robert DeLeo said, don't bother. The session's going to end, and Baker will veto it anyways. So it never got put forth. So now she wrote another one for this year. It's going forward, and Charlie Baker, in all his wisdom, jumped on board as well. Charlie Baker's bill, like I said, is about half of what the Promise Act is. And it has a lot of stipulations. So my request to this school committee is that they support the Promise Act. And I talked to Lee earlier, the chairperson, and she has her own resolution that she's going to put forth, so I really appreciate that. This is some information about what's been done so far with the Promise Act and the Cherish Act as well. This is as of March. You can see 116 legislators have signed on to it. They've signed the bill. More than 60 school committees, hopefully, after tonight there'll be 61. Those are the main highlights I wanted to pull out of that slide. So I mentioned earlier that Mendon-Upton was owed about $485,000 a year. The next slide highlights towns in the surrounding areas. Again, by the Foundation Budget Review Committee, the Fund Our Future campaign extrapolated numbers from that committee to sort of use the formula and come up with these numbers on their own. So that $485,000 for Mendon is where that came from. These are some surrounding towns. Webster's over $2 million. Milford. I included Worcester in there, $69 million. Higher education, that includes state universities, including UMass and Bridgewater State, who have also signed on to the Promise Act as well. It includes community colleges have also signed on to the Promise Act as well. It's a lot of money that public education is owed. The next slide just talks about this lists all the school committees and boards of education for like higher ed that's already signed on for the bill. They made a commitment to vote for the Promise Act. There's a lot up there. Again, I hope to add Mendon-Upton as well. And I think that's it. So I think I probably forgot some stuff. I know I forgot my big check. It's actually sitting by it's sitting by Mr. Marshall's office actually right now. I should have called him.
Yeah, put the cash in your
Could have been right in the back of the truck. But anyway, I didn't know if there were any questions from anybody. I didn't want to open it up to too many questions. I know Joe has his own presentation to do, but so I just asked that the Mendon-Upton School Committee support the Promise Act and the Cherish Act as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. A lot of good information.
Maybe in the best interest in the committee to deliberate and possibly postpone definitely to the next meeting, whether or not we want to, considering we have a resolution on the table this evening at the end of the agenda, and possibly at the March 25th meeting, decide to vote on the Promise Act endorsement. Is that something?
Yeah. I think you probably would be well served to maybe read the resolution this evening, and then I've got some commentary and some thoughts regarding where these three different bills are and potential actions that you could take moving forward.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll postpone that discussion to the end of the agenda.
Yeah, you can have a discussion on it, but you don't definitively vote on a resolution. That would be fine.
All right. Okay, so next order of business is the presentation of the fiscal year 2019 MURSD budget.
Well, good evening, everyone. This evening, I'm going to be presenting a budget that hopefully our regional school committee will certify for fiscal year 2020, or the 2019-2020 school year. I intentionally chose to highlight our strategic plan because this budget will be the first fiscal year budget after the acceptance by the regional school committee of our brand new strategic plan, which is entitled Inspire. It really is a true vision, a true blueprint for our district moving forward over the next 5 years, and is very forward-thinking with regard to the types of programs and services that our students really need. So as we do every year, our budget is built upon 3 essential goals. The first one kind of speaks to our mission of our new strategic plan, to provide not only the academic, but also the social emotional services that all students need to thrive. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the whole notion of our Portrait of the Graduate competencies, or 6 essential skills that we feel every student needs to really be successful for post-secondary study and beyond. And then, as always, a perpetual goal is wherever we can find efficiencies in our budget to find them, and always to pursue cost savings. So in our strategic plan, we had a committee of approximately 30 to 35 parents, community members, educators, and students come together. And the first piece that we discussed were what were our essential beliefs about learning. And really it came down to 5 essential pieces that we as a committee, after a lot of reflection, a lot of input from all stakeholders, believe how does learning occur most powerfully and deeply. So first and foremost, I think it's all about relationships and establishing high quality relationships, all in the context of having an inclusive, supportive environment. Secondly, providing learning opportunities that really kind of stoke passion, but also nurture curiosity in all of our students. Really kind of what we were speaking to with the generous check from Boston Scientific, where we have learning opportunities that kind of speak to active hands-on learning, but also speaks to that creative side as well. When we provide learning opportunities that are authentic and have meaning far beyond just the four walls of the classroom. And last but not least, always being mindful of collaboration amongst our schools, with our families, but also with the larger community. We feel that these 5 elements really speak to how do we take an already solid, outstanding district and bring it to the next level. And it's really the foundation of all of the ideas and objectives of our strategic plan. So I'm really pleased to report as far as where we are today. Every single day in our 4 schools, we are living our beliefs about learning. As you know, we've had over the last 5 years or so, a clear focus on social emotional learning. We had the opportunity, I believe right before the holidays, I know Jan and Deb presented about the new SOAR and RISE initiatives that are happening at the elementary level. A PBIS, or Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Program, that kind of speaks to explicitly teaching positive pro-social behaviors to our youngest learners. There's been a real effort across the district to say, you know, meaningful learning is a lot more than MCAS, SAT, or AP scores. It's really about project-based learning. So a real focus of our efforts has been exactly on project-based learning across the level. Something that I know the school committee was a very large part of, that just this past fall, we had the opportunity to be recognized as one of 6 districts across the United States, being named as a Green Ribbon District by the U.S. Department of Education for the work that we've done, not only on sustainability education, but also saving resources, particularly in the area of electricity. And as ongoing, and I can say during my 8 years as superintendent, a commitment to the inclusion model at every single level, elementary, middle, and high school. And I think last but not least, I think it should be stated, unprecedented success academically, extracurricularly, and also in our athletic programs, okay? I know John and Marianne, as co-principals of the high school, to say that they have a ragged month in November and December would be the understatement of the year for kind of the embarrassment of riches that we've had in our athletic program with state championships, as you know, our football team going to Gillette Stadium for the first time in its history, but across the board, looking at where we are academically and also in the arts and the various co-curricular activities. I don't think it's a stretch in the least to say that this district has ever performed, and our students have ever performed at a higher level. So with that said, the first thing that we do after the goal setting process is to take a look at what is our enrollment and what are we projecting our enrollment to be. So our official October 1st, 2018 enrollment for this year is 2,333 students. When you look at the breakdown of the 2 communities, and therefore that determines the assessment to each community, it's been virtually unchanged over the last 3 years or so. Roughly about 44% of our students come from Mendon, and roughly 56% come from Upton. We're anticipating probably a decrease in the ballpark of about 30 students or so for next year. And the biggest change is going to be the matriculating class from our 4th grade going into MISCO, 5th grade. Right now in this year's 5th grade, we have approximately 200 students. In this year's 4th grade, we've got approximately, I think it's like 162. So that's a factor. We're also looking at perhaps slightly less kindergarten students. I will show you this is from NESDEC, our enrollment projections that we receive each year. And essentially what they look at is the birth rate 5 years ago. So if you follow the chart and you look at 2014 in kind of that bluish color, you see it's kind of level, maybe a slight decrease in the number of students that were born that will be entering kindergarten. Okay, I do say though, NESDEC over the last 2 years did project declines in enrollment, and over the last 2 years, we actually had an increase of approximately 70 students. So I would be standing before you lying if I said I had a world of confidence in our NESDEC projections. But I also think that part of it is directly reflective of migration into our communities because of the school district. If you were to take a look at our average class sizes over the last 5 years, we've pretty much maintained them across the board. Slight increase at MISCO and a slight increase at NIPMUC, and part of that NIPMUC increase has actually been a higher matriculation rate from the 8th grade going into 9th grade. So the proposed FY2020 budget is a $36,749,234 proposal. That is a 3.95% increase over the current year. This budget strictly maintains level services, and by the definition of level services, it means essentially keeping all the programs and services in place that we currently have this fiscal year. In my humble opinion, while it's very nice to have level services, if you are to look at Inspire, our strategic plan, there's really a solid vision there of moving the district to the next level. And some of the requests that came into the budget that I deem as real critical needs, particularly in the area of addressing students' social emotional needs, are not in this budget proposal, which I'm presenting to you this evening. So I think that's a source of concern, and I think it's something that we really need to plan for the future and having that appropriately met. So as I said, in my opinion, it will maintain reasonable class sizes and enables us to continue the work on initiatives that don't necessarily involve targeted investments with additional resources. So really, there's two sides of the budget. There are the drivers, the expenditures, and then there is the revenue. So first, I will talk about the drivers on the expenditure side. So for all of our employees, all of our salary increases, including steps and lanes, it's about $650,350, which is a 3.29% increase in our salary line. Most of our associations, our employees are receiving a 2.25% cost of living adjustment for next year. At this juncture, we have in place a 5% increase for healthcare insurance. We are still in the process of negotiation with Harvard Pilgrim Health. We feel that that is a bit on the high side, given where we are with regard to utilization rate. But the budget proposal that you have in place does have a 5% increase, and our latest quote is 4.9 from Harvard Pilgrim Health. We also, as we have had over the last 2 years, a fairly sizable increase in our assessment for our employees that are in the Worcester County retirement system, almost a 12% increase there. As far as transportation, two expenses there. One is the 3rd year of our regular transportation contract with Telstone & Son, which is a 4.95% increase, or a little under $81,000. And then a fairly significant increase in special education transportation. That is transportation for our special needs students who are in out-of-district placements. That is a little more than a 17% increase, or $162,000. As far as student services, again, some increases there. One being about $169,000 for out-of-district tuitions. Again, tuitions for special needs students who have some significant needs. And then we've budgeted an additional $26,549. Again, the regional school district has to assume tuitions for students who access Norfolk Aggie. As far as building and grounds, a modest increase of about $62,000, most of which kind of speaking to the increase in the price of heating oil, as we still use heating oil to heat Misco Hill, and then also some maintenance issues with boilers in all of our buildings, but again, particularly Misco Hill. As far as technology, all of our technology lines are completely level funded, and next year will be the last year of our leases through smart boards and desktops and laptops. And then I should note that because of a reduction in enrollment, this assumes the reduction of a grand total of 2.0 FTE teaching positions in the budget. So looking at it, and if you follow along, this is on page 5 of the handout. The general fund expenditures, if you look on, based upon our major cost codes, increase 3.95%. As far as the other side, the revenue side, I can honestly say we've never had a more atrocious year with regard to state aid. Once again, under the House 1 budget, which is Governor Baker's budget, we're receiving $20 additional per student, which comes out to be $44,020 increase. Regional transportation was level funded at a rate of 67% reimbursement. So actually with that level funding, we're realizing a decrease of $46,000. So between that decrease in regional transportation with a very paltry increase in Chapter 70, the net charter reimbursement, we have a grand total of 6 students for Mendon-Upton that access charter schools, so it really isn't a big funding stream either way. We're actually looking at less Chapter 70 state aid, or less total state aid in FY20 versus the current year. Right now it's at -7 $144. So as a result, once again, we find ourselves in a situation that to maintain things, the burden is going to fall to our two communities. I'm going to speak a little bit more about this in a minute, but on the state funding sheet and the Chapter 70 formula sheet, the minimum local contribution to the town of Mendon increases by $502,751, and to Upton increases by $604,300. That should be $340. So those are fairly significant increases in what the state is saying should be an increased contribution by our two towns. We're actually in certifying, proposing a level services budget. To make it work, we will need an additional $696,452 from the town of Mendon and an additional $836,022 from the town of Upton. Not including debt service. So the third revenue stream that we use is what we refer to as district receipts. What we usually do is we usually allocate a certain amount from really an account known as E&D, or excess and deficiency. It would be comparable to free cash that a town would have. So we're allocating $300,000 this year, which is $100,000 less than the current year, and $150,000 from various revolving accounts. And those generally are accounts such as before and after school care, the account that we use for tuition, for preschool, and so on. So our total district receipts come out to be $550,000. So again, if you follow this in the book, and it shows, this is on page 6, and it shows the breakdown by state aid versus our two towns. So as you can see, our state aid is essentially flat at minus 0.01%. The town of Mendon increase outside of debt is fairly substantial. It's a 7.59%. And also for the town of Upton, it's almost identical, 7.5%, 7.51%. Again, it's a fairly substantial increase. So this is, I think I would be making an understatement if I said that this is a very, very challenging budget. It's a challenging budget for our district. It's a challenging budget for both of our communities. But there's a few different ways that I want to take a look at this. And I've used some of these slides in the past to kind of underscore where we are in our two communities as far as burden and what the state is saying, where the burden lies. So first off, there's this idea of target share. And target share kind of speaks to what percentage should a community pay as far as to fund the K through 12 education of all the kids that live in that town. Okay, so it wouldn't be, for Mendon and Upton, it wouldn't be just the Mendon-Upton Regional School District. It would also include BVT, and to a much lower extent, Norfolk Aggie. So when the funding formula was tweaked in 2007, target share was introduced. And it's recalibrated every single year, and it's based upon really two factors. that are known as collectively as MRGF, which stands for Municipal Revenue Growth Factor. So essentially what the state does is they look at aggregate property values and aggregate income values, okay? It's kind of interesting. There is, by the formula, by this retweaking of the formula in 2007, on the whole, 59% of education should be covered by local towns, by the local assessments, and 41% by state aid. Okay, overall, when you look at the 351 communities. However, it varies based upon wealth. Okay, so based upon wealth, the poorest community is Lawrence, and Lawrence only has to cover about 14% of funding. And 145 communities are at the cap, which is them covering 82.5%. Okay, so if you were to take a look at our neighboring communities, you can see what the percentages are. Okay, and only one of our neighbors is at the cap, that's Hopkinton, but Westboro is pushing up against it. So keep in mind, it is a moving target every single year. It's recalibrated based upon, again, those two factors at looking at property values and looking at aggregate income. So the question is, looking at these communities and then looking at Mendon and Upton, what is the target share percentage for Mendon and Upton? So for FY20, they've calibrated Mendon to be at 74, a little under 75%, so 74.6%, and Upton to be at right around 74%, so 73.86%. So you can see from a wealth perspective, looking at those two factors, our two communities are very, very similar. So here's the rub, and this is why it's been a real cycle of problem with regard to state aid, okay, under the rules of the game, so to speak. Mendon and Upton are two of 57 communities. So 57 communities out of the 351 in the Commonwealth are below their target share. So what they do is they take a look at, okay, for the current fiscal year, what is the actual contribution? So you can see Mendon is at a little under 72%, and Upton is a little under 69%. So you could see that there is a shortfall from what the state is saying vis-a-vis the formula, what they should be contributing, okay? So as a result, in calculating something known as the minimum local contribution, that is the amount that each town should be contributing extra for the next fiscal year, they've actually added a percentage point to say, hey, Mendon, hey, Upton, you need to get closer to your target share. So I think both communities have made progress. Quite frankly, I can say in my 8 years, they've made progress. I think a frustrating factor is that whole aspect of it being a moving target. I can tell you when I was presenting with Don Moran the FY12 budget, it was probably high 50s, low 60s as far as target share, correct me if I'm wrong, Don. So it kind of, again, speaks to the relative wealth of the communities relative to the Commonwealth. So it's very interesting. So here's another piece for consideration. If you were to track what the minimum local contribution increases were to be over the last 7 years, you can kind of see they're a little bit all over the board. but you can see this trend over this current fiscal year and next fiscal year, some pretty significant increases, okay? In real dollars and also percentage from the previous year. So when you take that and you cross-reference with how much did each community actually give us in additional, the blue represents the minimum local contribution increase in dollars, and the orange represents how much additional the district received. Okay, so it's probably not difficult to ascertain from this graph what the override year was. Okay, call me Captain Obvious, but you can see, if you can see along the bottom there, what the increases were versus the actual assessment increases. And there's places where there was real deltas. And if you look at FY2019, you're talking about a delta over $100,000 of the recommended, the minimum local contribution increase versus what was actually given to the regional school district. So quite frankly, I'm not surprised that the MLC actually went up even more. So if you look at the same trend for the town of Upton in gray, again, it's mirroring Mendon as far as fairly significant MLC increases in FY19 and FY20. And then again, in orange, what was actually given. So again, you can see last fiscal year, or actually the current fiscal year, FY19, it was an MLC increase of 6.90%. The actual assessment in real dollars was an increase of 3.69. So you've got a delta there of over about $125,000. Let me give you one more look at this. And I'm glad Doug mentioned the whole notion of foundation budget. Foundation budget, it's important to realize that foundation budget, as Doug mentioned, is an absolute floor. It's the absolute bare minimum that you could have. So if you were to track over time, how do districts in the Commonwealth fund their schools? That flat blue line would represent foundation budget. And I think at last toll, there are only 5 districts out of 320 something that fund either at foundation budget or below. If you look at the gray, that represents the state average. Okay, the state average of how do districts fund above foundation. So for the current fiscal year, the data from the Department of Education, on average, districts fund about 26% higher than foundation, okay? This year, we're at 116%. Okay, so we made the most progress at getting closer to the state average right around the override year. Okay, so right around FY15, FY16. Okay, but my concern is we're gradually sloping away from it. And I think it kind of speaks to funding. And this is not by any means a complex, a simple issue. I think a key issue that we have is the burden on both of our communities and a ridiculously low amount of state support. Without getting into a ton of weeds, I just want to give you one final look at this. So every year when the governor's budget is released, we get this fascinating form, this monster spreadsheet, and it's known as a cherry sheet, and it has all the statistical information, okay? As far as what is happening with regard to funding and the responsibility of funding, as far as what the state is going to pick up, and as far as what the local towns should pick up. What I'm going to do is I want to zoom in on this right part of the slide here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that, and I would turn your attention to the section that I highlighted. Actually, look right below, Chapter 78. So it shows the Chapter 78 with our whopping increase of 44,000, which goes to a whopping 0.3% increase. But then look what the state is saying with regard to the required district contribution, 7.49%. Okay, according to the state funding formula, they're saying our two towns should be contributing an increase of about 7.49%. If you recall and you look in your sheet, in order to maintain level services, as you can see, the increase to both of our towns was, I think, almost exactly that, 7.5, 7.51%. So it's kind of interesting to see the convergence of the numbers in what the state is saying we owe versus, you know, I give a great deal of credit to my admin team, to the budget subcommittee in putting this budget together, what it means in actual real terms to maintain level services. That 7.5% gets you just level services. It doesn't necessarily even get you the growth that we need. So what does this all mean? So in my humble opinion, the proposed budget that you have before you will maintain our current programs and services. I also believe that it's fiscally responsible, even though I'm fully aware that it is a large challenge to both of our staffs. I think we're in the same position that we've been over the past several years, and I think we're here feeling it even in a much more dramatic fashion. But because the way the state's funding formula is structured, the continued pressure on the two communities to move to that target share and to fund a greater percentage of the education in our districts is going to be present. I can't echo enough that if there is no additional funding, then really maintenance of our level services will become impossible. If we have additional years where we're having strictly a revenue-based budget, then my fear is we will very much see an erosion of programs and services. We will see cuts to staff, cuts to programs, and I think we'll be in a situation that the district was in back in 2009, 2010. And again, I can't echo enough. I think a key piece here is the funding of our strategic plan. We put a significant amount of time and energy and effort. I think it represents very much a vision of our parents, of our community, of our professional staff. And I think it would be a terrible shame that if we could not come together as a community and appropriately fund this vision. Something that I did not speak to explicitly that kind of speaks to one of our three goals is this whole notion of the MURSD portrait of the graduate. Again, these 6 core competencies that we expect from all of our students. So the first one being effective communication. effective communication of all of our kids, the ability to collaborate, to work together, to be a global citizen in person, through travel, or even virtually. The ability to innovate, to problem solve, to take it to the next level. But probably most of all is the portrait of a graduate competency that kind of speaks to being mindful, a mindful learner. And it really kind of speaks to that whole social emotional learning piece. I think every single parent that I speak to, every community member that I speak to, every educator that I speak to is really passionate about the relationships and the quality of relationships that we form across all grade levels. That is the very, very heart of what we did. Plain and simple. So I conclude with, yes, it's about programs and services, but it's really about, again, that relationship piece. It's about the 203 educators and the 405 in total educators and professional staff that are deeply committed to providing a really high quality education to all of our students. So that's where we are. As you know, we have every year key upcoming dates. We're still relatively early in the process, but by our regional charter, we have to certify a budget at least 6 weeks before each town meeting. And you see where the town meetings are. They're very early this year. But with that said, I'd be more than happy to take any questions if anybody has them.
So Joe, I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to the types of choices that we're really representing with this budget. So you've gone over all of the objectives that we had out of our strategic plan, but there's also, we've had a meeting with the towns in a multi-board format to really talk about how our strategy could align with the town strategies. That's a lot of the thinking that we're going about with this budget. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Sure. Well, what we've presented at the multi-board approximately a week and a half ago were really 3 options. One option was what was originally presented back in January, which would be level services with some targeted investments. And those targeted investments were a grand total of 4 FTEs. 2 were school psychologists, split between the two towns. A additional team chair, dean of students type position to really help at the elementary levels, and also a wellness teacher. So those are not included in this proposal. Again, I don't see those positions by any stretch of the imagination as wants. I see them as critical needs, particularly in some of the stressors that we're seeing in our schools, particularly with some of our youngest learners, the degree of anxiety and mental health issues that we're seeing. I think those are some real critical needs. So there was that budget, there was the level services budget, and then there was a pared down budget that really kind of only spoke to minimum local contribution. So essentially it would be this budget minus approximately $450,000, $460,000. You know, I think at this juncture, we're still a little early in the process. Every year, there is in April, the House budget is released, and then in May, after our town meetings, the Senate budget is released. We typically do better, and the budget that is approved tonight is a conservative one. based upon conservative revenue estimates. However, to be very, very honest with you, I don't see $450,000, us getting a windfall of $450,000 out of a House or a Senate budget. So I think that will even be a challenge as well. So, you know, as I say in my background notes, at this juncture, you know, certifying at level services is a prudent option. You can always certify down. You cannot certify up once you certify as a committee. I think to answer your question, Sean, with regard to long-term strategy, it's my feeling very strongly that because of the high emphasis on a tax base that's almost, for all intents and purposes, strictly residential in both of our communities, there's always going to be a tremendous stressor on both towns. However, I don't see how the school district sustains itself over a period of every 4 or 5 years without some type of strategic override to be brought forward. You can't make it work with just strictly something that's revenue-based, based upon what's out there. Do I completely understand the town side as far as limited resources? And when I speak to both sides and they're saying, okay, we're putting forward something that's level services. I get it, completely get it. But I think it's also critical to work together and to have a partnership, but also to keep in mind the value of our school district and what it means to the value of the larger communities. Hope that wasn't too wordy.
No, it was good.
Other questions?
I think that was very thorough. I mean, the facts are the facts.
There's one more question I have is, do you think it's possible to work together with the towns to come up with a maybe a longer term strategy so that we aren't constantly confronted with this into the future?
If I, yes, in my humble opinion, yes. I think instead of having perhaps a strategy where we have this one super, super large override, and then we try to kind of get by from year to year, maybe a multi-tiered approach in looking at revenue set aside over a period of 3 years or something like that, that we knew that we had that additional amount each year for each community would probably be a smart approach.
Yeah.
Mr. Flaherty.
You're talking about, you know, all these increases. I believe the number we're looking at is something like maybe 650, 700,000 between 2.5% and new growth. You know, what you said before, when you can only pick up 2.5%, and your side's going up 7%, and our side could go from any number, 2.5% doesn't work. You know, but how do you change it? Okay, people are so locked into this thing. Oh, 2.5%, 2.5%. You know, that doesn't work. Just let me say, how much more do you figure you're going to get out of the House and Senate budget?
Conservatively, $100,000.
That's all?
In my tenure, the worst I've ever done is about 40,000. The best I've ever done is about 150,000.
Because
last year was 40,000.
Last year we talked, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about option 1, option 2, and option 3.
Yeah.
And, you know, I I'm not telling tales out of school, you know, we can handle option 3, no problem at all. I don't know what Mendon can do with it. Worst comes to worst, speaking for myself now, knowing what I know, we might be able to do option 2.
I think just pragmatically right now, I think we're putting forth option 2 because we talk to people and we look at what's there. They're basically saying, you know, you should give us a budget that's level service. So what we have this year is what we'll have next year in the budget we're proposing. And that gives us a chance because we can always go down, but to work with both towns to figure out where we end up.
Well, that was the point of, what, 2 weeks ago, I guess, right?
That was the start of it, to be clear. I mean, I think, you know, in Upton, you're still doing some stuff. Mendon, they're still doing some stuff. So there's still work to be done. And bluntly, we're still doing stuff too. So this is a very, as Joe said, fluid process. So.
But in spite of all the angst and everything that goes into this, it usually shakes out.
It does, but it shakes out because we work together to make it shake out.
Well, I'm not disagreeing there, but I'm saying.
I think, Paul, I comfortably speak for all 6 members of the school committee in saying we're deeply committed to working together and not to kind of have a lot of drama, a lot of consternation, none of that. But also, as Phil kind of alludes to, I think it would be unconscionable at this juncture if the school committee certified at something that was lower than level services. So I think, again, it's a fluid process. You know, on the other side of the coin, to be frank, I don't think there's a lot of rabbits out of hats to be pulled out. We're still trying to negotiate healthcare insurance. We'll see where the state budget is. We'll see where Norfolk Aggie tuitions come out. So those are 3 big factors still at play. We're going to do everything to make this work. We're going to do everything to make things work with both towns. But I think at this point, we've got to go level services.
You know, people have to understand that, you know, you got nobody here. I mean, a lot of people here. There's a lot of people that should be here to hear what this is all about. All right, and then it gets heard secondhand from the donut shop or wherever the hell these people hear all this stuff.
Dennis Beyer, Jay's older, smarter brother, is watching this live on YouTube right now.
Yeah, and how many others are?
What a long, strange trip it's been.
But no, you know, there's all these aspects of that the 2 towns have and you have, and every town has. You have no control.
Now,
You have absolutely no control, all right? And, you know, both towns always came up with the magic number used to be discretionary. That was the amount of money that we gave over and above the minimum local contribution. You know, like I say, all you can do is see what happens at this point.
yeah.
Couldn't agree more. And I would say this year is this is going to require a lot more conversations, I think, than some of the past couple of years, mainly because of the fact that the state has essentially said to us, we're actually going to take money away from you.
Yeah.
Might only be $744, but they're going to take money away in our budget.
So that's, you know, I speak for myself here because I don't want to speak for anybody else on the committee, but I was voting for that strategic plan in a big way. I would love us to get that top number, just not out of opulence, but I look at those priorities as being not emergencies, but I look at them being very, very important to the psychological well-being of our kids. And we've had a lot of feedback from parents and community members that have raised emergencies about that. Some of the special education priorities and what we're trying to do there, those are all going to get basically postponed, but in a climate where we're constantly postponing those things, we're going to constantly get further and further behind. So to me, working with the towns overrides that in some way, but just barely for me. For me, it seems like those priorities are extremely important. It's not like we're asking for a new football field or something that's optional. We're trying to get the health and well-being of our children taken care of. So to me, that's kind of an emergency.
I'm not being critical in that aspect at all, but we just alluded to something and say, well, we get this thing squared away. And then Dr. Joe referred to it, put it on next year. You're gonna have a tough sell on an override. I mean, that's a bad word.
I know it is in some circles. But it's worse having a failing school system that is not working for the communities.
There's people coming into our town that I hear, and Kelly talks to them more than I do, and why are you coming here? Because of the school system. I was doing this back when, they were in the hopper.
I know.
So,
I think as we go through over the next 2 months, as we prepare for the town meeting, it'll be important to make sure that we're also getting out, I'll call it the facts to people, because to your point, there aren't a lot of people here. I mean, we have had some full houses before, but those were probably more.
but the other part of it too is people hear what they want to hear.
They do. But that would be why it's important to get, the facts out. I mean, if you think about, just look at the operational budget over the last 5 years. I mean, over 5 years, we've gone up in a total of 6.2%. Take the number out of 16 and you take what's being proposed in 2020, it's 6.2%. There aren't many businesses you can say and take a look at that are kind of growing and evolving and doing what we need to do that can manage budgets that quick. I know you know that better than most people, so. But that'll be part of the points we gotta get out there and we gotta talk to people about. And then we're gonna have to work together with, your group's committee and with Mendon's and figure out, how do we make this work?
I think this is where it starts.
Yep.
This is our first pass. This is our presentation right now. So, we generally don't have a lot of people here, but maybe once word starts to circulate. But I think the hardest part is getting the real true facts to people. I mean, I know when we were in our override year, Joe, you conducted a lot of information sessions just so that people would get accurate information about what MLC is and how the foundation budget works and why it isn't working in our favor, in the public schools' favor, to be able to adequately fund our budget. And I'll say, when I saw option A, B, and C, and the one that had some targeted investments, primarily geared towards SEL, school psychologists, that were very specific. I mean, I am a firm believer in you can't teach kids unless they're healthy, socially and emotionally. So like for me, there's no luxury there. That's just a bare minimum. You're gonna take care of kids' social emotional needs before you can take care of their academic needs. So it is hard to kind of abandon that thought that we could have what we need for our students.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You want to come up to the mic?
Hi, Shelley Cook. I don't know what else. Is this on? Yeah. I don't know whether I should present as a part of the union or as a member of the town.
How about both?
Or both, okay. I live in Upton and I'm also a teacher, part of the union. So I have a question about the budgets. I looked at 2016 and also the current for 2020 proposed. And I just noticed two things that were a bit off, and I'm wondering if they were restructured due to the state requirement or something that would help us better maybe meet our numbers.
Okay, so what were they?
So the 1,000, I noticed that the instructional technology curriculum and school admin were taken off the admin, the central office admin, and moved into the teaching. I'm not sure exactly which one was, but they were changed to a different location.
Probably because it was more than a year ago, the reclassification of codes.
Yeah, but school leadership has always been an instructional expense, always.
Okay. Even in the 2016?
back in 2002, 2003. It's always been considered instructional.
So I was playing around with numbers. So I was trying to- and then also the 4,000, I think that was custodials was off significantly. I was wondering if that had been moved to a different location also.
Custodial's in the same place, but there's some technology stuff that's been moved into the maintenance area.
Okay, so it's been allocated to a different location.
Technology used to be in the 1,000s and now it's in the 4,000s. Some is,
Okay.
and some is still in the 1,000s. It just depends on what the expense is.
Okay.
State restructured their whole function code thing about 1.5 years, 2 years ago.
So I should be able to go back to 27?
Well, when I do the historicals, I try to say, okay, it was paid for this amount, so I put it where it is now to keep it consistent.
Okay,
So
so
it
that's not going to affect what we'll be getting from the state?
No.
No,
I
not
don't think that's any
necessarily.
effect.
Okay.
The key piece, Shelley, what we receive with regard to state aid, again, goes to that whole piece around target share, which again goes directly to that MRGF, that municipal revenue growth factor, and looking at the aggregate relative wealth of the 351 communities.
Which has nothing to do with the application.
None.
Okay.
None whatsoever.
All right, thank you very much.
Don?
So just have you given any thought to at least explaining what the impact to the district would be? One, if the towns were only able to live within the 2.5 plus new growth, which is probably, I would guess, close, you said 450,000 just for minimum local contribution, right? You would
Yeah,
lose.
but
If they only gave 2.5 for new growth, that's probably closer to $1 million.
Easily.
Easily. I mean, I think it's important for people to hear the message of what that would do to the district.
Okay, so if you're talking $1 million, you're easily talking about 20 positions, the loss of about 20 positions.
Yeah, I just think people need to understand when Paul says that's all the towns typically are able to give because of Prop 2.5 and new growth.
Yeah.
So do you have I'm sorry, go ahead.
But of that, Don, you gotta keep some for yourself. That's the problem.
Agreed. No, I'm just saying, I think you, at least hearing the message of what, even if you certify today at what you're asking, and then you say, okay, we'll accept just the minimum local contribution, that's still more than the towns.
Yeah, and I think we're in a place, Don, where I see this as kind of a little bit as kind of going back to the future in the sense that we're going to have to spend a significant amount of our upcoming school committee meetings kind of dedicated to having these discussions about where we are with regard to resolving this deficit that we potentially are looking at. And looking at where we are both on the expenditure side, but also as we go through the spring season, both the House and Senate budgets. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, we move to the school committee certification of FY2020 MURSD budget.
Ready. Okay. I make a motion to set the operational budget for the Mendon-Upton Regional School Districts for the 2019 to 2020 fiscal year at $36,749,234. That consists of the general operations within the levy limit of $35,890,549 and debt service outside the levy limit of $858,685.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the operational budget be set. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously.
I make a motion to assess the town of Mendon $10,285,276 that consists of the following. Minimum local contribution at $7,235,126. Non-discretionary charges, $771,541. Discretionary charges, $1,862,836. Long-term debt, Clough Memorial School at $347,104. Long-term debt, Misco Green Repair at $68,669.
Second.
Okay, it is moved and seconded to assess the town of Mendon sub-named. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously.
I make a motion to assess the town of Upton $12,407,280 that consists of the following. Minimum local contribution at $8,656,095. Non-discretionary charges at $968,908. Discretionary charges at $2,339,365. Long-term debt, Clough Memorial School at $356,096. Long-term debt, Misco Green Repair at $86,816.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the assessment to the town of Upton in the sum named. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that motion carries unanimously.
All right, I make a motion to appropriate $13,506,678 from state aid that consists of the following. Chapter 70 funds at $12,426,746. Regional transportation reimbursement at $1,073,326. Charter school tuition reimbursement at $6,606.
Second.
Okay, the appropriation from state aid has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Make a motion to appropriate $550,000 from the following school district sources. Excess and deficiency at $300,000. Vision sped tuition, $75,000. Transfer in from revolving accounts at $150,000. Medicaid reimbursement at $25,000.
Second.
The named appropriation has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The motion carries unanimously. Okay, next item on the agenda is the school committee resolution on state school finance priorities. Would you want to speak first?
Yeah, let me. So what you have before you is a resolution that you could take as a school committee. And if you recall, we received correspondence from our 4 legislative representatives, which I shared at last meeting, asking for our input of what our position should be with regard to legislative priorities with regard to action on the Foundation Budget Review Commission. So this resolution that you have before you really encompasses the document that I also shared with you last meeting, which was the Superintendents Association's key recommendations, but also really targeted on funding streams that are the most germane to the regional school district. So I would recommend that you read this. I don't think you necessarily have to take action. I think kind of in speaking to what Doug was mentioning before, I think we would probably be really well served. We could, at the next school committee meeting, take a look at the 3 acts, the 3 bills that are pending, I'm going to tell you, I'm in agreement with Doug with regard to, and the MTA with regard to the Promise Act. It blows away the Baker bill. But I think in doing this resolution, realize there's aspects of this resolution which are even more aggressive than the Promise Act. And there's some pieces in this resolution that are not addressed by the Promise Act, i.e. regional transportation reimbursement, i.e. Reimbursement for special education transportation. So I think you'd be really well served to do a public reading of this evening, and then we can discuss in a little bit more detail those three bills. And then if you choose, you could also vote to endorse the Promise Act as well. Okay?
Joe, can I speak?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, if you guys need more information that I can provide from the MTA or anything else in terms of those two bills, I'd be happy to do that. Just let me know. Dr. Mushik, let me know.
Well, you're going to do the presentation at the next meeting, 2 weeks from
That's
today.
not,
Okay?
no, I'd be happy to, that information.
Sure. Thank you, Doug.
I shall commence with the reading of the resolution. We, the Mendon-Upton Regional School District School Committee, welcome the opportunity to engage with state legislators as they consider the needs of our children in school districts across the Commonwealth. In light of the cogent recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission, we believe the following priorities need active consideration in any budget outcome for fiscal year 2020 and beyond. Therefore, we resolve that following components be part of the final legislation that is enacted into law. That the legislature increase state aids for all school districts, including that the Chapter 70 per pupil aid should be set annually at a minimum increase of $150 per student or greater for all school districts effective for fiscal year 2020. That the average local target share goal be reduced to 58% from the current 59%. That with circuit breaker reimbursement, all assumed out-of-district rates should capture the total costs that districts bear before circuit breaker reimbursement is triggered. And additionally, that these costs are fully funded annually. That the currently unfulfilled promise of regional school district transportation reimbursement, which stated in law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16C, should be reimbursed annually at 100%, is fully funded. Furthermore, we resolve that the legislature also include the following as part of the foundation formula: an incorporation into the annual calculations, a separate healthcare cost inflation adjuster for the employee health insurance portion of the employee benefits fixed charges component of the formula, based on the change in the current GIC rates. A full implementation of special education rates for both in and out of district costs, including an increase in the foundation rate from 3.75% to 4%. An incorporation of the annual reimbursement of the cost borne by districts for the transportation of special education students, both in and out of district. These critical components will be communicated in writing to our 4 legislative representatives without delay. This is so resolved by the Mendon-Upton Regional School Committee on this day, March 11, 2019. All right. Is there any discussion or any questions?
So we'll take the three documents into consideration and have a vote the next meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely to the meeting of March 25th. Next item on the agenda is correspondence. Is there any correspondence that we need to be aware of?
We don't have any now.
Are there other topics not reasonably anticipated by this committee? Clearly, there was an advance of the meeting. Okay, hearing none, the committee will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
The meeting is adjourned at 8:34.
Aye.
Hi.
Hi.
Really nice to
Nice
meet
to
you.
see you. I did, I was on
All right. I'm excited.